Hey there, my name is Lily and I like to learn from nature. Welcome to the first part of my series, Bite-Sized Biomimicry, where we're going to be diving into the topic of learning from nature, biomimicry, what does it mean, examples of it, and the broader spectrum of the entire field. We're going to do that bit by bit in these bite-sized pieces, so stick around. And this is part one where we're just going to go into the 3 levels of biomimicry, a few examples, and give you some resources to get started. We share our planet with more than 30 million other species, many of whom have been around much longer than us, and we have so much to learn from how they have adapted to their unique ecosystems. Biomimicry, by definition, is innovation inspired by nature, or the conscious emulation of nature's genius. This practice, perspective, and methodology has been rapidly growing in the last 50 years, although humans have been learning from nature since there have been humans on this planet. One of my favorite ways to explain biomimicry is to give examples and real-life case studies of people doing biomimicry globally. One of these classic examples is the Shinkansen train in Japan that was redesigned to solve some challenges with the shape of a kingfisher beak as its inspiration. The kingfisher is able to go from one medium to the next, from air to water. It dives to catch prey. And its beak is long and narrow, allowing it to do that without a ripple, so the fish don't swim away. The kingfisher beak inspired a redesign of the Shinkansen train, and I'll drop a video down below that does a full explanation. This is a great example of form-based biomimicry, where they looked at a shape or form in nature and solved a challenge in our human-built environment with that form as inspiration and guide. Another example of form-based biomimicry is with the morpho butterfly, one of my favorite organisms. This brilliant blue metallic butterfly lives in the tropics, and it doesn't have any pigment or dye to create this blue color. In fact, it's just light waves that are interacting with the surface structure that create that brilliant blue we see, which is why it's called structural color. And companies are learning from this to create less toxic coloration on designs that last longer and aren't as harmful to our bodies or the environment. Process-focused biomimicry can get a little trickier because it often involves chemistry, which I know can be scary, but nature's chemistry is elegant and beautiful and inspiring, even if it can be tricky to understand sometimes. Here's one example that I like. Mussel Polymers Incorporated is a company that looked to how mussels attach to rock underwater. Glues and adhesives, even in our best design case, are really toxic, don't work well underwater, and involve a lot of chemicals that could have really harmful downstream impacts. Mussel polymers learned from a simple protein reaction that the mussels do to attach to rock with Bissell threads, and they mimicked that protein combination to create a life-friendly glue that works well underwater. Another example of process-focused biomimicry can come in all shapes and sizes, like how shells form, coral reefs form. They use carbon to create structures, and this process can be mimicked to create more life-friendly processes in our own built environment, like concrete or other building materials. One quick example of systems level biomimicry is how architects and engineers and urban planners are looking to create buildings and cities that function like the ecosystems in which they exist. This can be really hard to do well because it requires a deep understanding of the interactions and relationships in that ecosystem. Biomimicry is ultimately about mimicking function in nature. I'll talk more about function in another video, but know this. Function is why. Why does nature do what it does? Why does bark exist? Why do tree leaves exist? Why do butterfly wings exist? That question of why is function, and ultimately, function is what we're looking at in biomimicry. We'll get to the how in another video. How is the adaptations, the strategies, the mechanisms for how all these functions work in nature. Here are some of my favorite books for getting started in biomimicry. First and foremost, the Janine Benyus Innovation Inspired by Nature book that came out in the late 90s. This is a great introduction to biomimicry as a whole, and she interviews folks that are practicing biomimicry. Some of the companies are a little outdated since it's now been 30 years almost, and there are ways to dive deeper into this. She does a great TED Talk. She runs the company Biomimicry 3.8, and you can look more into the articles and media that she's put out. She's a great spokesperson for biomimicry. If you want to start practicing biomimicry, Dayna Baumeister, the co-founder of Biomimicry 3.8 and who's worked alongside Janine Benyus in the last 30 years, wrote a handbook, a resource handbook for biomimicry that goes through the whole process, how to do it, practical ways to approach it. And it's a really great introduction, but it goes more into depth if you really want to get into it. And I'm going to throw this in here too because it's one of my favorite books, and I think it's a beautiful place to start thinking about our relationship as a human with our natural environment. Because if we start thinking about it, are we separate? Is nature other? Are humans part of nature? Are we separate from nature? Robin Wall Kimmerer does a beautiful job of talking about nature, a relationality, how we can be better neighbors, and I think this is great to pair with anything you start thinking about biomimicry because it'll give you a deeper grounding for our place here on this planet. There are a ton of great biomimicry resources that I will link in the description of this video, so if you're interested, you can dive deeper into each of the levels, form, process, and system, as well as some of the background information and even other topics that are related like traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous science. Feel free to drop any other questions you have about biomimicry or anything related to this field in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a video as we explain more and dive deeper into this important practice. Okay, we know what biomimicry is, but what is biomimicry not? What are all those bio words that are so confusing? Let's get into it in the next video. Nature is so cool!